You're watching a Highwire Media podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Dead Reckoning podcast, the show where we talk about mysteries, generally dumping all over them because they turn out to be not very mysterious. Stonehenge is what we're covering today, and of course, it was definitely aliens that built it. I feel like I've discussed Stonehenge in the past on videos and with people I know, so I'm definitely going to know pretty much everything we're talking about. But anyways, let's jump in. Sit back, relax, and indulge in your stimulants of choice. And let's dive right in. After briefly rereading my introduction, it occurred to me that I had somewhat naively assumed that everybody would immediately know what I was talking about. Although it's probably safe to assume that anybody who lives in the UK knows at least something about Stonehenge. It's a fairly famous monument internationally. It's like, people know the palace in India. It's not King Tut because that's the Egyptian guy, but it's the one he built for his wife or something. The Taj Mahal. Anyways, it might be useful to provide a little background information. Believed to have been built during the transition from the Neolithic period to the Bronze Age, with work estimated to have begun around 3000 BC and ended in 1520 BCE, Stonehenge, as its name suggests, is a large stone monument consisting of an outer ring of freestanding stones that stand about 13 feet or 4 meters in height. Yeah, they're much bigger than you think. Like, me personally, I always thought Stonehenge would be about my height or a little shorter, but it's actually big. These stones are connected with lintels, which are, you guessed it, also made of stone. Inside the outer circle is a smaller circle consisting of a number of blue stones, which in turn originally surrounded 5 trilithians. The trilithian is a megalithic structure containing 2 upright stones and a third across the top. The monument stands on Salisbury Plain in the county of Wiltshire, located in the south of England. So why is it so special? Well, there are quite a few reasons. Firstly, and perhaps most obviously, it's incredibly impressive that it's still there at all. Although it has sustained serious damage during the 5,000 years or so that it existed, it's still in comparatively good shape. Although a lot of the damage can simply be put down to the ravages of time, some pieces are removed over the year by stonemasons or farmers who were looking for material for projects and were unable to resist this huge stockpile of resources. The past was different, right? It's like, yeah, no, why wouldn't we just knock down that ancient structure and use it to build a wall? Come on, let's go, it's easy. Someone already dug up the rock for us. Sadly, the most recent monument vandals have consisted of tourists who, in order to make a quick buck on eBay, chipped small fragments off from the larger rocks and sold them online. It's illegal, right? I mean, that's not cool. These combined attacks notwithstanding, I'm fairly sure that you'd be hard pushed to find anything constructed in compliance with today's building regulations that would have held up as well as Stonehenge after 5,000 years. So, how exactly was Stonehenge built? Obviously, it's impossible to say without absolute certainty, but let's first look at the version of events given most credence by scientists, historians, and archaeologists. Yes, the most sensible one, no doubt. I will, of course, look at some of the more outlandish suggestions later on in this video, because what fun is the Dead Reckoning show if we don't get to hit up on aliens? I don't want to ruin the surprise for anybody, but the word aliens is likely to make an appearance. Yes. The general assumption of present day people that people in the past were all stupid and couldn't do anything. This episode is sponsored by NordVPN, the fastest, most reliable way to stay safe online. Let's be honest, the internet isn't exactly a safe neighborhood anymore. Between hackers, data leaks, and companies tracking everything you do online, protecting yourself is no longer an option. That's why I use NordVPN. NordVPN keeps your data encrypted and your identity private with next generation security. So whether you're on public Wi-Fi, traveling, or working from home, Your information stays yours. Think of it as your own digital security guard, always on duty. And with over 6,000 servers in 60 plus countries, you can connect anywhere in the world with a single click. Want to stream shows from another country or access websites that are blocked in your region? Easy. NordVPN makes it happen instantly. I use it personally when I'm researching true crime cases and need to access archived or international sources. Keeps my work secure and my connection private. So here's the deal. Use the link in the description today, and at checkout, get a huge discount on a 2-year plan plus 3 extra months free. That's 77% off a 2-year plan with 3 extra free months. It's an incredible offer for complete digital protection. Don't wait until your data ends up in the wrong hands. Stay safe, stay private, and stay secure with NordVPN, because your digital life deserves protection. Now, let's get back to our episode. It's generally believed that Stonehenge, as we know it today, was the end product of several stages, with the first stage resulting in something far less impressive than its final incarnation. According to English Heritage, the first monument at Stonehenge was a circular earthwork enclosure built in about 3000 BC. The ditch was dug with simple antler tools and the chalk piled up to make an inner and outer bank. Within the ditch was a ring of 56 timber or stone posts. Archaeological analysts suggest that the site was initially used as a site for cremating the dead for several hundred years. The next stage of construction is believed to have taken place around 2150 BCE and included the addition of approximately 80 blue stones, the majority of which can still be seen today. It was at this point that some truly Herculean effort was expended on this effort. You see, there was something a little bit special about these 2 blue stones. Leaving to one side for a monument, the fact that they each weighed between 2 and 5 tons, they weren't exactly what you might describe as a local. Oh yeah, isn't this like why there's a bit of a mystery around this, because the stones were brought in from really far away? Like back in the day before people had wheels and, basic conventions. Can you imagine the guy who invented the wheel, or like how the wheel got invented? That must have been some crazy shit. He's like, guys, I got something to show you. Check this out. And he shows them the wheel, and they'd all just be like, bro, this is gonna change the world. And it did. For whatever reason, the people who had taken it upon themselves to carry out modifications on Stonehenge had decided that the only stones that were suitable were some that were located 240 miles or 386 kilometers away in South Wales. That's a long drive, and in the past, it's even longer. Bearing in mind that this particular construction project took place before the invention of the wheel, transporting the stones must have been a really arduous task. Even if they had wheels, it's really far. In the past, the transport route is, of course, somewhat uncertain. However, having spent nearly a day reading the work of people who have studied this sort of thing for their entire working lives, I believe that the most likely route is as follows. Although many of the stones were undoubtedly quarried from the mountain, there is evidence to suggest that several of them were taken from a pre-existing nearby monument. Once they had all been assembled, they were dragged on wooden rollers to what is now known as Milford Haven before being transported along the south coast of Wales, up the rivers Avon and Frome before being rolled overland to the River Wylye, don't care. Whereupon they were once again transported by raft to the Salisbury Avon and on to Amesbury before making the short journey to the final destination. That was a big ass raft, because they didn't say there were several tons. While the stone, these guys built rafts for like tons of stones. It's kind of nuts to think about it. While the stones to finish the epic journey were arranged in an incomplete double circle at the center of the henge, it would not be until a third stage of development that they were moved once again to form the more familiar arrangement that we know today. The third and final stage included the installation of the outer ring of larger stones. The adjoining lintels and the 5 trillionths, the stone things that we talked about before, they would be arranged in a horseshoe shape at the center. This final stage is believed to have been taken place in about 2000 BC and demonstrates some truly remarkable construction techniques. But before these remarkable techniques could be put into practice, the builders once again found themselves in need of material. Fortunately for those tasked with the jobs of locating the necessary building materials, there was a plentiful supply of sarsen, the type of stone used in the construction of both the outer ring and the center trilithons. Why is this word, if this word is hard to say, just be like Stonehenge stuff, okay? Can't think of the appropriate word to replace it with. Trilithons, it is, whatever, however you say it. It's about 20 miles, 32 kilometers away, on the area of the Marlborough Downs, known as Westwoods. Although this was considerably closer than the mountains of South Wales, given the stones used in this third phase, weigh on average about 25 tons. Transporting them, even over this comparatively short distance, was still an impressive feat in and of itself. No wheels, 25 tons, that's 25 small cars for each stone. That's fucking nuts. Due to the sheer mass of the stones, using the nearby river for transport was not an option, and so they were dragged the entire distance by hand. According to an article in the New Zealand Herald, calculations have shown that it would have taken 500 men using leather ropes to pull one stone, with an extra 100 men needed to lay the rollers in front of the sledge. Once the stones were on site, the truly remarkable construction techniques that we spoke of earlier came into play. Using only simple hammers and chisels, the stonemasons shaped these giant lumps of sarsen. The shaping process included creating protruding tenons on top of the upright stones. It's tenons, not tendons. A tenon is a projecting piece of wood made for insertion into a mortise in another piece. In addition to this, either a tongue or a groove was carved in the end of each lintel so that the entire outer structure slotted seamlessly together. The use of these techniques, primarily found only in woodworking, demonstrates a level of craftsmanship only usually associated with far more modern construction. So now we have a rough idea of how Stonehenge was probably built, but let's now have a look at why. Unfortunately, it's necessary to repeat a phrase that has already come up several times in this script. Nobody is completely sure. Once again, we're going to look at the suggestions that are the most scientific evidence and move on to some, shall we say, slightly more outlandish suggestions later on. I promise the aliens are coming. One thing that almost everybody within the scientific community agrees on is that Stonehenge, or at least the site of Stonehenge, has been used for several different things over the years. Well, yeah, obviously. Now it's a tourist site. Before that, it was, they were cremating the bodies. Before that, or after that, people were nicking bits to make walls. As I mentioned earlier, it's widely believed that in its first incarnation, it was used as a cremation site. This hypothesis, at least, has a reasonable amount of supporting evidence. Archaeological excavation that has taken place on the site has unearthed huge amounts of burnt or partially burnt skeletal remains. Interestingly, though, although many of these were discovered during an archaeological dig in the 1920s, there was very little interest in either studying or displaying these remains at that time. According to one archaeologist who studied the remains more recently, said, quote, "These people had been cremated. They did not have nice skulls with gleaming teeth fit for display. They had bundles of ash and pieces of broken bone. The archaeologists were not interested in those objects at that time. It was firmly believed that there was nothing you could learn from looking at cremated bone." Yeah, that's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know what you could learn from looking at cremated bone, but I'm always like, never underestimate the sort of technology that they can make in the future. Like, that DNA evidence that was thrown away or that just doesn't exist now because people are like, well, how's that? Nah, it's not possible. I'm just like, okay, yeah, maybe it's useless, but just in case it's not, let's just bag it up and keep it in a box in a warehouse somewhere just in case. Because the future is going to get crazy. These bones were considered so scientifically insignificant that in 1935 they were reburied at the site. More recently, the bones were once again removed and transported to a local university to undergo thorough analysis, and the results were fascinating. This is, I believe, with archaeology now, when they're digging up a site, they'll purposefully not excavate the whole thing or like leave bits because they'll be like, we don't know what future archaeologist technology is going to exist, so let's just leave that bit for people from the future, just in case they come with something really cool. Although next to nothing is known about human social construct from the time of Stonehenge, analysis of these bones have allowed archaeologists to gather evidence which supports the theories that even so long ago, the country was run by at least one group of social elites, and it was these individuals who were chosen for burial at Stonehenge. Yeah, every time through history, it's always like, I wonder how long before the humans put a hierarchy in place. We just love hierarchies. We're just into that stuff. We're just not into everything being equal. We've tried it many times and it always comes back to, let's make sure there are some social elites. Let's go ahead. The bones that were excavated appear to have come from comparatively healthy individuals and show very little sign of the damage caused by hard labor. Additionally, they seem to be mostly male and mostly had died between the ages of 25 and 40. This information, although not entirely surprising, has led archaeologists to infer that they came from a patriarchal society, with most, if not all, positions of power and responsibility being held by men. Ah, yes, the good old days. But what about the second and third stages? What could possibly have been so important that it necessitated the transporting of almost 100 incredibly heavy stones hundreds of miles from their original location? As for the stones, the most likely reason that they were transported from Wales is that whoever organized the second stage wanted to include some aspects of the previously mentioned, much more ancient monuments, from which many of them were taken. Unfortunately, we know even less about the aforementioned monument than we do about Stonehenge. So, although this theory is the most popular, it remains just that, a theory. One of the few things that we definitely do know about the last stages of construction is that it was at this point when it began to take on a far greater cultural significance. It has long been believed that Stonehenge was constructed as some sort of calendar, but until very recently, it was not entirely clear how it worked. If you were to stand in the center of Stonehenge on the morning of the longest day of the year, you would see the sun rise directly to the left of what is referred to as the heel stone. Originally, there were two stones, and the sun would have risen directly in between them. There is a second alignment to the southwest, which highlights the shortest day of the year. Although this feature would have undoubtedly been useful to keep track of the changing seasons and when carrying out ceremonial observances, Stonehenge expert Timothy Darville believes that the capabilities of the monument were much more complex. During the COVID-19 pandemic, he took advantage of the lack of tourists at Stonehenge and carried out his own extensive research. Writing for the journal Antiquity, he says the following quote, "A ring of 30 upright sarsen stones once stood in a circle, representing each day of the month for a total of 360 days a year. While some are now missing, excavation shows that they were once present in uniform size and shape. The additional 5 days needed to be consistent with the solar year are found in 5 structures in the Trilithian horseshoe within the center of Stonehenge. 4 stones on the outside of the circle kept track of the leap year every 4 years. The top of the circle is thought to illuminate the summer solstice, and the bottom, the winter solstice." This is what always blows my mind because it's like people in the past, this was like, what, thousands of years ago? If someone was like, hey, given all you know, even what you've just read, go and make one of these. And I'd be like, I don't know how. I wouldn't be able to figure it out. And I'm in the modern age, having been educated and have all this knowledge and still be like, it's going to take me a long time to figure that out. The way that the sun shines through the monument told ancient people the timing of each solstice and when the auspicious days of a harvest festival would have been to be celebrated. If you can go to Stonehenge, you can pick out which Sarsen stone represents the current day within a month. It all works quite nicely. Given that the average person of the time would have been unlikely to be able to calculate these things themselves, anybody who fully understood the workings of Stonehenge would most likely have been granted almost godlike status. Imagine being able to proclaim in the middle of winter that you've just foreseen the times would get better, and days would get longer, only to have your proclamation come true. Is it any wonder that there is so much evidence of the henge being a popular gathering site? Up until this point, everything that I've written has at least some archaeological or scientific basis to back it up. But now is the time that we look at some of the altogether less likely explanations behind Stonehenge. Perhaps the most particular myth associated with Stonehenge comes from Geoffrey of Monmouth and his Histories of the Kings of Britain, which until very recently was considered to be an accurate historical account. As the story goes, during the 5th century, both Saxon and British leaders met on Salisbury Plain in order to attempt to negotiate a truce, and agree land sharing terms. While those agreed that everybody who attended would be unarmed, the Saxons double-crossed the British, those devilish Saxons, and many of the noblemen were assassinated. 7 years later, a prince known as Aurelius Ambrosius, along with his brother Uther Pendragon, both of whom have been in exile in France, returned to the site of the massacre and agreed that some sort of monument should be put in a place to honor the fallen. Pendragon discussed the matter with the wizard Merlin. Wait, how does anybody think this is real? We know Merlin's fake. Isn't King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table fake? And Merlin said, oh my god, I cannot read this quote right. If thou be fain to grace the burial place of these men with a work that shall endure forever, send for the dance of the giants that is in Killarus, a mountain in Ireland, for a structure of stones is there, that none of this age could raise, save his wit were strong enough to carry his art. Sometimes you read a sentence from the past and you're like, what are you trying to say? Oh, Merlin, learn to speak, Merlin. That was just a nightmare to read. 15,000 men were dispatched to retrieve the stones, but although they were able to defeat the defending army, they were not able to move the stones. Legend has it, at this point, Merlin used his magical powers to transport the stones to Salisbury Plain, where they still remain to this day. Although this is a great story, I think it's fairly safe to say that it can be completely discounted. Personally, it has been scientifically proven that Stonehenge was in place long before this story takes place. Secondly, there's no credible historical evidence that verifies the existence of any of the people in this story. And thirdly, if Merlin was capable of magically transporting the stones, then why did they need to send 15,000 men in the first place? Because none of it's real. How? When did they think this was historically accurate? How long ago was that? Come on, people, we know Merlin's not real. The almost inconceivable age of Stonehenge puts pay to many of the more popular legends regarding its construction. Some people have claimed that it was built by the Romans. It's a little bit off and was originally designed to be the centerpiece for some sort of palace. But if that were true, the Romans would have had to started work in Britain an exceptionally long time before they were in Britain. Similarly, claims that it was originally constructed by druids as a place of worship must also be dismissed, as the original structure predates druidism. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Aliens. No slightly baffling problem would be complete without at least one group claiming alien involvement, and Stonehenge is no exception. You don't have to go to Google too hard to find websites and YouTube channels that are dedicated to this topic. And I imagine that exactly none of you would be surprised to hear that it has frequently been discussed on History Channel's Ancient Aliens. I say when History Channel is in print anywhere, it should have quotations around it like History Channel. You know what I mean? Most of the alien theories are based around two issues that certain people have with the current scientific and archaeological explanations. The first of these is how were the stones moved all the way from Wales? Although we have already covered the answer to this very conclusively, there are those who vociferously claim, often with their fingers in their ears, that wooden rollers would not be strong enough to support the weight of the stone. Sadly for those individuals, we know that's not true. Scientists, not usually in the habit of proposing theories and then not bothering to test them, have tested this. And this case is not an exception. Yeah, that's what scientists do. They come up with a hypothesis, and then they test the hypothesis. Or some other scientist does. Thus, and then someone else tests it as well to make sure that the first scientist was right. That's how science works. On more than a few occasions, the log rolling concept has been tested and proved to be viable. I also feel compelled to mention that the moving of massive stones has often been facilitated by the use of massive whips. This is another technique that some historians believe may have been used. The second argument that is often used to back up the alien involvement theory is the lack of stone masonry skill around that time. Although it is certainly true that there's very little evidence to suggest that joinery techniques used in the creation of the second and third stages at Stonehenge were in common use at the time, it is generally accepted that these techniques were used when working with wood, and therefore it's not an inconceivable stretch of the imagination to suggest that they may have been adapted. Yeah, but something important enough, they'd be like, let's just do the wood thing. And they're like, with stone? But why do people think that aliens travel thousands of light years just to build a few stone circles and a handful of pyramids? Again, there are several popular theories. The first of these, most often referred to as the helping hand or something similar, implies that, tired of watching us struggle to make any sort of progress, these alleged alien life forms just stop by to teach us a bit of stone masonry and joinery before heading home again, and occasionally popping back to monitor our progress. Sounds incredibly likely. The second theory was what do you call it? Popularized by Swiss author Erich von Däniken in his famous book Chariots of the Gods, later named Chariots of the Gods, with a question mark on the end because there was something with something, but he had to be less certain about it to lie. Anyway, and I'm like, well, it has to be believable. In the book, he populated the Stonehenge had been built by aliens and was a replica of the solar system and could be used as a alien landing pad. Of course it does, because the aliens who have traveled thousands of light years need some rocks to land on. In my opinion, as there is no verifiable evidence of it ever being used as such, seems like an awful lot of work for very little use. The third and final theory that I'm going to mention today is definitely my favorite. First put forward by David Hatcher Childress, the theory, which he calls the world grid, suggests that Stonehenge and a number of other ancient monuments were constructed by aliens in order to recharge their space-going vehicles. Right? That makes sense. They would charge them with rocks. That's why they need rocks. According to Hatcher, quote, the world grid is an intelligent geometric pattern of the Earth and its energies, a wave that the sunlight hits the Earth and wraps the Earth like a ball of string of energy, creating this energy grid. Though it doesn't, Hatcher, that's not how it works. Although nobody else seems to be aware of this grid, our alien visitors certainly were. And to that end, they set about utilizing this resource. So why can't we as humans utilize these wireless charging pads? Well, he has an answer for that too, because they're broken. Oh no. While playing with a scholastic set in order to demonstrate a simple circuit, he explains that due to the fact that all these structures have sustained serious damage over the years, the electric flow has been interrupted and the world network is no longer functional. Wow, so disappointing that something so real and realistic just stopped working. It's such a shame. Poor aliens. So, I'll leave it up to you to decide which theory is most likely. Is it the most scientifically supported theory that we spoke of at the beginning? Is it the legend of Merlin, the helping hand, the world grid, or a combination of all the above, or something else entirely. Before we finish today, I'd like to take this opportunity to say that if you ever find yourself in the vicinity of Stonehenge, you have to visit. Thank you for being here for this episode about Stonehenge. Relatively short one today. How about that? If you like this show, please do leave a review if you listen to it as a podcast. If you're on YouTube, like, subscribe, and if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/LarryMLease. And don't forget to follow us on social media. All the links are in the description. And with that, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.